Welcome to the Emblazers Show, Season 2, B2B Leaders Igniting Revenue. I'm Abby Kerr with the Emblaze Revenue Community by Corporate Visions, and I am so happy to be here as your Season 2 host. Now, you might be wondering, where the heck is Tim Riesterer? Great question. I'm wondering where my co-host is too. If you know anything about Tim and his hobbies, you will know that he is definitely not on a golf course somewhere, but he's probably giving an amazing keynote at some B2B enterprise company, which is the best use of his professional talents. So Tim will be joining me just a little bit later in the season, but to get the season started, I wanted to share with you a few conversations that Tim has recently had with some amazing revenue growth leaders and practitioners and others who work in the space and just have a lot of really interesting insights to offer. Today, we're going to dive into a conversation that Tim recently had with Larry Shurtz. Now, Larry Shurtz is a seasoned sales leader with over 3 decades of experience in the technology sector. As Chief Sales Officer at Genesys, he has driven the company's cloud solutions to record growth, achieving $1.4 billion in annual recurring revenue. Prior to Genesys, Larry led a 1,300-member team at Salesforce, generating $2.1 billion in revenue, and played a pivotal role at Confluent, steering the company to a $600 million annual recurring revenue milestone. Larry holds a degree from the University of Arizona and is based in Irvine, California. Let's check out their conversation.
And the last time I saw Larry when we did a webcast was just after lockdown. And I'll just admit, like last time I'd seen Larry, before that, no beard. Then we were in lockdown, and then this one's trimmed back a little bit, but it was shocking. But we all kind of went there during lockdown, I guess.
Yeah, I had to go to that dark place, and then I needed to keep a lot of it.
Well, that's good. It works, and maybe it's as you're now several career moves on a upwards trajectory. It just goes with the territory, I'm guessing. So,
well, you have been in every part of the journey. I'm grateful for the relationship and the support, and obviously all the innovation that comes out of the CVI shop has been instrumental, really, in every role that I've had. So, appreciate it.
Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of this community now.
Yeah.
Our listeners are revenue leaders who are B2B enterprise field team leaders. It's an evolving time, and everybody says it. And our audience is looking for leaders who are having success to tell them some of their secrets. So that's why you're here today.
Cool.
And they're not necessarily in your chair, but they might aspire to be in your chair. So let's talk a little bit, like from the get-go here, what's changing and what's staying the same from your seat, the Chief Sales Officer seat, when it comes to salespeople and where they add value and all that they're facing out there. And then we'll dig in underneath those answers.
Yeah. So listen, I think it's changed. It's changed a lot. I think it's even changing in the market today. When I was early in my career, I didn't really heard of the CSO, right? It was only the CRO. And I think there's been so much movement and so many different variations depending upon the size and complexity of organization and the requirements, people's skill sets, what they bring to the table, what growth might look like. But kind of regardless of all of those, Tim, just the imperative and the reliance that companies have on this role has heightened. And I think it's probably across a couple of buckets. Number one, whether your company is oriented towards bookings or revenue or net new ACV, whatever the metric is, this role more and more is becoming accountable. So if you think in a racy type of format, accountable for strategic growth, and how do you architect that cross-functionally? So this role is deeply involved in all of the company strategy, not just obviously running a sales organization, but how does that interrelate and work in combination with product, with marketing, with customer success. And it's all really just rotated towards sustainable growth and predictability. I think that's number one is that shift and that reliance on strategic growth. number two is really the importance of data. I actually don't think this is that different. You and I have had a lot of these conversations about the importance of data. It's always kind of been the case, but we have even better data and analytics today. And your ability to kind of extract that data and turn that into insights and usable information, I think, is the key. There is the opportunity, if you will, to get bogged down in data and end up nowhere. Either, you could actually get more confused from the data. So really getting insights out of data to help improve predictability and the overall health of the business is key. With regard to customer success, if this role does not if inside of this org, customer success is not there, whether that be customer success managers or technical account managers or other roles that are not sales specific, this role requires a deep connection and partnership with your CS peer. There really can be no air gaps, not in the SaaS model. I think in the on-prem world, you could sell a lot of software. Other teams would come in and implement it. Next time you see how the account was, next time I was there to sell software. SaaS world doesn't work like that. So there really can't be gaps between this role and customer success. And then ultimately, the talent piece of this, of how do you get the right people on board that aren't just going to deliver a number for a quarter or 2 quarters or a year or 2 years, but how do you keep evolving this talent flywheel based upon everything that I just talked about? I think those are the pretty cool parts of the role that are always, there's always something new every day. It kind of keeps you, if you have a creative learning mindset, it's a good spot to be in.
So different than just chasing the number, right? I mean, this idea of just a strategic growth architect, a predictable revenue builder, so many hands and feet, arms and legs to this thing. It's crazy. What are some of the biggest challenges? Like that, those all sound great and they make total sense on paper. What are some of the biggest challenges for the CSO in market? What's going on out there, if you will, and making those things you just described a reality.
Well, again, something you and I talk a lot about, that the buying behavior is only getting more complex. I'll kind of park the macroeconomic political influences and everything that's happening geopolitically across the globe. The things that I would legitimately say are outside of your control. Right. The buyer behavior has become more and more complex in distributed selling organizations. There's more and more stakeholders. Being able to differentiate the people who have a voice versus a vote, the people who have both. How are you predictable inside of longer sales cycles? That is the complexity of the selling environment. I'm sure I said this 5 years ago that it would never be more complex. It is more complex, and I think it's only getting more so that way. Even when you think about leadership transitions inside our companies, if you really haven't architected a deep organizational mapping and alignment, you're probably going to lose a coach, probably going to lose a champion in a 12 to 18 month sales cycle. And what do you do then? Right? Like that can't be the excuse for not getting something done. So complex buying behavior. The talent side of thing is always a challenge. Not just getting great talent into the company. How do you pitch your company? How do you create a valuable opening scenario? But how do you retain them? How do you continue to challenge them? How do you skill advance? How do you partner in this role with your HR business partner and with enablement? If this role doesn't have enablement inside of it, how do you create that learning environment where you can not just attract but retain? Because more and more, there's a lot of competition, not just for selling products, but the companies you're competing with that sell the same products or similar products are also trying to get your people. And that churn is a lot, in particular, or has potential to be a lot, and particularly internationally. You could be down for a year if you make the wrong talent decisions. So it's very, very important that you think about that. And then there's no shortage of pressure around predictable growth. Doesn't matter whether you're a public company and you have a public board, whether you're PE backed and you have sponsors, whether it's VC money, the pressure to perform predictably and consistently will never be higher. You're always working with someone else's money and addressing a lot of different stakeholders. And then, as I mentioned before, just really that alignment cross-functionally can be challenging, right? In particular, if at the top of the organization, you don't have a common goal framework, it is kind of incumbent on you in this role to architect and align, build the relationships, run your internal sales campaigns so that you have champions inside the organization. Ultimately, the organization has to deliver for customers, and that's a cross-functional effort.
If you're a leader of people, you know how critical it is to hire the right talent for your team. So next, Tim asks Larry about how he acquires his talent pool and specifically what key traits he looks for when he's hiring sales leaders. Let's see what Larry said.
It's interesting if you poll probably 5 different sales leaders, you're going to get different opinions. I think that's one of the very cool things about hiring talent. People have different opinions of what that might look like, and I think all are very valid as long as it works. And here are the probably like 3 or 4 things that have worked for me. Hiring is always an imperfect science, but the 4 things that I try to sense for and unpack in the interview cycle. Number 1 is just experience. And it doesn't have to always be positive, by the way. I actually enjoy, and I think you get the most value from people that have had a wide range of experiences, things that went very, very well in their career and things that did not go the way they wanted so well in their career. I think the learning, my opinion is that the learning in the latter bucket is more valuable than winning. Is what do you learn when things don't go the way you want? So I like a wide range of experiences. I do believe we are the sum of our experiences. Good, bad, indifferent, however you think about that. Number 2 is adaptability. You can sense this out through the experiences. When things change, how do people handle it? When things change for the better, how did you handle that? When something changed that you had no opinion or no idea was going to happen, how did you handle it? How did you pivot? I think that adaptability piece, in Tim, like we were talking about earlier, in particular in today's selling market, you have to be adaptable. Any different day, some new thing is going to pop up that's going to require you to adapt in some way, shape, or form. So I like to sense for that. I have always enjoyed smart people. I do think smarter people tend to do better in this business, just my opinion. And then I think the last is you have to have a strong motor. You really, and when I say motor, like, I'm going to stick with a motor analogy or metaphor, like gas in the tank, like how you cannot be outworked in this business. And obviously you got to work smart and you got to take care of yourself and you got to take care of your teams. But this is hard. If you really want to commit to this and execute and do well in this business, you cannot get outworked. It's not optional. So for me, I think it's probably across those 3 or 4 things that matter the most to me.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazgrowth.com.
Talent retention is probably just as important, if not more important, than finding the right talent and onboarding them well. So next, Tim asks Larry what he has done as a senior leader to help retain the great leaders that he's hired. Let's check it out.
Yeah, I mean, my personal leadership style has changed a lot over time. If I look back at my first leadership job in technology was at PTC. This was a long time ago. PTC has for those of your viewers that know PTC, particularly PTC in the old days when Medic was formed. Now I'm definitely dating myself. That was a very different culture than PTC today, and that was a very different leadership style that worked at that point in time. So mine has dramatically changed over time. I do, if I had to pick a leadership style and what I actually have seen be most successful in the roles that I've chosen, the roles that we hire for, is the concept of servant leadership. There's a great book on this if you haven't read it. Just the combination of compassion and character and competence in a way that does not in any way sacrifice the requirement for performance and discipline and rigor. I have tended to move more that direction, and that probably for the past 10 years, I would say most defines my leadership style. And if I looked at the composite of my peer group, they're all kind of in that mode as well.
That's the audience who's probably listening to this, and I'm sure that resonates with a number of people. I think creating a culture, sales was like the original remote workers, right? And it's so important that certain things move through the culture and do it remotely, and the leaders, your frontline leaders, are part of that. What's some of the pitfalls you see other than like salespeople and sales leaders? Like they're just kind of all out there. They're not all coming to a hub, and they're not all like iron isn't sharpening iron. It's kind of out there on their own. What are the pitfalls, and how do you overcome those?
Yeah, the remote thing, I think, threw us all for a bit of or took us for a bit of a loop. I don't. You don't really, there wasn't any training when we all got thrown into this back in the COVID days. It's not like there was a book on this, that you didn't go to school and learn how to be a remote leader. You didn't go to school or read a book about, how do you ensure that a company values are showing up every day. We didn't talk about enablement remotely, ironically, right? So a lot of that changed, and we've just kind of been morphing and forming as we go. And for the people, again, that are adaptable, that have a learning mentality, I think we've gotten there. And now a lot of it has come back, certainly based on roles. But for me, folks that move into the sales leadership role, and I would say whether you're doing this remotely or whether this is in person, there's a couple of pitfalls, or I think common things to be aware of if you're moving into that role. Number one is that the natural tendency is to stay in your old role, yet you have a new title. So you are a VP or you're a director, whatever the frontline manager role is in a company. And you are having trouble extricating yourself from being the fantastic individual contributor you were because you got into a situation where you're promoted. And how do you transition that into being a great leader and forming your leadership style and trying enough things where you can adapt and learn on things that work for you as a leader? That, I think, is actually the hardest thing consistently. It was the hardest thing for me, still is the hardest thing for me. A lot of that is we all love being in the field. We all love interacting with customers. If you're in this business, you love selling. You want to be the person talking sometimes. And it's just a very different role. And I think being cognizant of that and catching yourself and owning that and replacing that with leadership techniques and leadership influence is important. The other that's very difficult, and I would say this is something that even some of the most tenured sales leaders and even myself am like consistently challenging myself on, is with regard to talent. A little bit to the talent conversation we had earlier. When you know someone is not in the right role, they may be in a different role in the company, might be a better fit for them. This isn't necessarily a person isn't right for the company conversation, but that particular person with that particular set of skills is not purpose-built and cannot be successful in the role that they are in. How do you handle that? How quickly do you move on that situation, knowing that that isn't the very best situation you can put yourself in as a leader of a team? And in particular, by the time you know that there's maybe not a good fit, the team already knows. So the team's kind of waiting on you to come around. So I think it's probably those two things. One, recognizing you're a leader now, not an individual contributor. And two, being able to put the very best team on the field at all times and moving quickly when you know it's not a fit for a specific person in a specific role. I think those are the two big ones, in my opinion.
Makes sense. Let's dive into performance for a moment. Like, it's a complex B2B environment. You established that earlier.
Yeah.
And now we've talked about team and talent and leadership and culture, the orchestration of all this. Let's just actually talk about the blocking and the tackling for a minute. Like, how is that evolving? What's going on out there that you've got your eyes on and you're helping your team? You talked about adaptability a lot. So let's talk about, what are you doing to drive performance? What do we used to say? Belly to belly, if you will, where the rubber hits the road, or one of those other metaphors.
Yeah, I will have to say this is where we have leveraged CBI a lot, as I mentioned earlier, in our time together. In every role, CBI has been a material, I would say, actual stakeholder in our success. I would say that if this was not a CBI podcast, Tim, you know that. And I think it's around a couple different buckets, right? Number one, like the impetus and the importance of planning. Account planning, team planning, having a place where you have your strategy and your execution framework, and you have the roles and responsibilities defined. I think there's a real imperative around planning. If you're in any level of a competitive space, which it's probably hard to find one that isn't, and the jobs we've chosen, the importance of planning. And as an account executive and as a leader, architecting that team to execute on behalf of a customer is critical. That's probably number one. Number two, I would say, is the importance of the ecosystem. More and more, like point solutions can be successful, I think, in the short term. But if you really want to drive what I say nonlinear growth, where you don't have to pay an AE, it isn't A times B equals C, where you have nonlinear growth, you have nonlinear outcomes that can be driven through an ecosystem of partners. That is becoming more and more important. That is becoming more and more important and valuable for customers today. Partners that are coming in and talking about, the ecosystem. And then, I would have to say around just execution, there's no replacement still. There never has been, and I don't think there ever will be, as the core building blocks of executing consistently. Then executive sponsorship and leveraging a framework for opportunity execution. I obviously I mentioned my PTC days, so it's now MedPick. It was Medic. That is kind of in my framework. I don't know that there's a better one out there, but whatever that is, you got to have those kind of four things, in my opinion, if you're going to execute with consistency and predictability, and as you said, have that level of adaptability in the market. You gotta have your act together on those things, in my opinion.
Yeah, just a few more of those nuggets would be awesome in terms of leaders listening now. What are some of the levers they need to pull, buttons they need to push to accelerate deals? Like, they're working for you and there's still a number and they got to hit it. What would you be coaching them on in terms of focus?
Okay. So I don't, in particular in this market today, and who knows what it becomes, but I do think this will be a consistent thing moving forward. The importance of value versus price. And I'll approach this a little bit from what I know does not work, or what I have seen certainly over however long I've been doing this. If you went back and assessed the opportunities that did not happen, either they slipped or pushed or you lost, there's been a couple consistent things. So I'm going to approach this from the negative, if that's okay. Number one is one of the conversations that was had, or the framing of the opportunity of why that opportunity was going to happen, was because it was a good deal for them, or they could save X amount of money because of the price of the software. So I'm not talking about the value proposition, right? I'm talking about the actual unit economics of what you're selling. My opinion, those deals do not get done anymore. That is a nice to have. That isn't the framework for getting a deal done. You have to be selling value. In our market at Genesys, it's an incredible opportunity for us. We can actually present business metrics on efficiency and experience. So we can talk about on the experience side, NPS and CSAT and the value of reducing churn. And on efficiency, we can talk about average handle time reduction and first contact resolution and all of those things. So like the combination of those two things that build a valuable story. And the teams need to be very good at talking about value as opposed to price. And that actually helps you all the way down to the negotiation table. If you know the value proposition, if you've quantified that, again, great use case for CVI, if you've quantified that value, if you socialize that value, confirm that value up through finance, you're going to get less resistance in procurement. They'll still ask, but you've got a foundation at that point that isn't around price. It's around value. It's number one.
Yep.
Number two is you have to have a compelling event. Again, I'll reference the first one because like the price expires or something like that. Not a compelling event, right? C-level initiatives, board level compensation metrics, burning platforms that present risk, in particular to a regulated industry, right? Those are compelling events. And if you aren't selling value, if you aren't learning a compelling event, yes, I know I'm unpacking MedPick at this point, but if you don't have those two things, I think you're going to be in a lot of trouble in this market. There's too many other good teams that are doing it. So I would argue those two are not, in the framing of competition. I don't think those are competitive advantages. I think those are competitive necessities. You have to be selling this way.
What about the executive buyer? You're going there with C-level initiative. You're talking about risk. One of the things that the C-level buyers can't delegate is risk. How important is it to have the confidence and the competence and be able to hang with higher level decision makers when it comes to getting stuff done?
It's huge. You got to have it. I mean, we for a time in this role and in selling in general, you'd take maybe a certain deal amount, you just carve some artificial number and you'd say, if a deal is over $1 million, it needs to have this level of sponsorship and from the selling organization. That person needs to be aligned to a certain person. As your business grows, though, you kind of quickly realize it's not scalable. If your only opportunity to get a big deal done is to have your CEO on the phone with another CEO, you probably aren't going to be employed for long. So that has to get driven down through the organization. You have to drive the enablement. It really is on the company, by the way. This is one of those things you and I were talking earlier, that the range of excellence, if you will, from awareness to application to mastery, that everyone in the selling organization, everyone touching the customer, in my opinion, has to get towards mastery on how do you have that C-level conversation? How do you present your unique differentiators, defendable, relevant, unique differentiators up against the competition? If your language that's coming out of your mouth are the same things that your competition can say, they probably are. And then you're just gobbledygook at that point. And in today's competitive environment where our customers are kind of confused, just take the whole AI topic, by the way. I won't get on my full soapbox here, but you know how many AI messages are hitting executives these days? If you're in the AI space and you can't clearly differentiate, you're going to have a problem. So I think everybody's got to have a level of competence, certainly from application over to mastery, because you can't just rely on your executives to go have these conversations with other executives. It doesn't scale.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't scale. The solution itself is hard to discern differentiation, but right. Now you, the seller, are the differentiation. It seems like you're saying.
Yep.
What an interesting conversation and a great first episode for season 2 of the Emblazers show. Thank you, Tim. We will see you again soon. Thank you, Larry, for sharing all of your wisdom. And thank you for watching or listening on your favorite platform. Be sure to follow the Emblazers show on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.